La Llorona is still there, crying near the rivers. It's a sentence that feels like a cold finger tracing your spine, isn't it? When you walk through the sprawling, neon-lit streets of Mexico City or the humid alleys of Cartagena, you feel the pulse of the modern world. You hear the reggaeton blasting from passing cars, the clatter of street vendors closing up shop, and the constant rhythmic hum of millions of people living their lives. Everything feels grounded, tangible, and very much anchored in the 21st century. But have you ever noticed how that energy shifts the moment you get close to the water? Whether it's the ancient, dark canals of Xochimilco or a simple concrete drainage ditch in a suburban neighborhood, the air changes. It gets heavier. It gets quieter. And that's when you realize that the title isn't just a dramatic hook, it's a geographical warning. We've been conditioned to think of her as a bedtime story. If you grew up in a Latin American household, you know the drill. She was the boogeyman used to keep you from wandering off at night, or to make sure you finished your dinner. We've turned her into a cultural icon, a costume for Day of the Dead, a character in big-budget horror movies. We've sanitized her. We've told ourselves that she belongs to the past, to a time of superstition and colonial shadows. By calling her a legend, we give ourselves permission to stop being afraid. We treat her like a piece of folklore that lives only in dusty books or in the memories of our grandmothers. But let's be honest with each other for a second. Why is it that even the most cynical, tech-savvy person among us feels a sudden irrational urge to pick up their pace when they hear a distant, high-pitched sound echoing over a riverbank at 3 a.m.? It's because, deep down, we know that normality is a very thin veil. We live in these living cities that feel so permanent, yet they are built right on top of neighborhoods and civilizations that existed long before the first brick of a skyscraper was ever laid. The rivers that cut through these urban landscapes aren't just bodies of water. They are scars in the earth that refuse to heal. They are the original roads of the continent, and they carry memories that haven't faded. When we talk about La Llorona, we aren't just talking about a ghost. We are talking about a persistent frequency. People don't just know her story, they claim to experience it. They don't see her as a historical figure, but as a neighbor they hope never to meet. Think about the sheer scale of this. In a world where every mystery is supposedly solved by a quick Google search, the woman in white remains an unexplained constant. Why does everyone, from the mountains of the Andes to the valleys of Mexico, share the same specific dread? It's because she isn't a story being told, she's a presence being felt. She is the glitch in our modern reality, the reminder that some things don't evolve and some grief never ends. She is still there, waiting in the places where the city's noise dies down and the water begins to whisper. The question isn't whether you believe in the legend. The question is why, after all this time, the rivers are still answering her. If you really want to understand why this story refuses to die, you have to stop looking at history books and start looking at a map. You see, the thing about La Llorona is that she isn't a ghost of the woods or some distant abandoned castle. She is a ghost of the infrastructure. She lives in the very veins of our cities. To find her, you have to go where the pavement ends and the water begins. Or more accurately, to the place where the city tried and failed to bury its past. Take Mexico City, for example. We walk across it every day, thinking we're on solid ground, but we're actually walking on a ghost. The entire metropolis is built over what used to be Lake Texcoco, a massive, shimmering expanse of water that the Spanish tried to drain and the modern world tried to pave over. But water has a memory, and so does she. When you go down to the canals of Xochimilco, you're not just taking a tourist boat ride, you're entering her primary residence. If you've ever been there as the sun starts to dip below the horizon, you felt that shift I'm talking about. The colorful trajineras stop their music, the vendors go home, and suddenly those narrow channels of water become a labyrinth of shadows and tall, whispering reeds. It's not a ruin, it's a living, breathing agricultural system where people still work the land, yet it feels ancient. The water there is dark, almost like ink, reflecting the willow trees that lean over the banks like mourners. People who live on the chinampas, those floating gardens, don't talk about her like she's a myth. They talk about her like it's the weather. They'll tell you that on certain nights, the mist rolls off the water so thick you can't see your own hands, and that's when the sound starts. It's a physical place, a geographical reality that anchors the legend to the mud and the silt. But it's not just the obvious spots. The truly chilling part of her precise location is that she follows the water even when we try to hide it. Think about the great avenues of Mexico City, like Rio Churubusco or Rio de la Piedad. To a modern driver, these are just congested highways filled with smog and taillights. But the names give the secret away. These were once open rivers. Engineers forced them into giant concrete pipes and buried them deep beneath the asphalt to make room for our cars and our progress. Yet there are countless stories from night shift workers, taxi drivers, and people living in basement apartments who swear they can hear a rhythmic, echoing wail coming from the storm drains. It's as if the city's plumbing is haunted by the same grief that walked the riverbanks 500 years ago. You can't build over a tragedy and expect it to stay down. Then you have the colonial bridges. Every old city in Latin America has them, those heavy stone structures built with mortar and sweat centuries ago. These are liminal spaces, places that are neither here nor there, connecting one side of a divide to another. These bridges are magnets for her presence. There's something about the way sound bounces off stone and carries over a stream that creates the perfect acoustic chamber for a nightmare. Think of the bridge you pass on your way home, the one that looks a bit too narrow, where the streetlights always seem to flicker just a little more than they should. It's not abandoned, it's a functional part of your commute, and that's what makes the visualization so disturbing. She isn't waiting in a place you'll never go, she's waiting in the place you pass every Tuesday night. She is also a creature of the rural outskirts, the places where the city's grip begins to loosen and the wild starts to creep back in. In these zones, where the irrigation ditches cut through cornfields and the small creeks swell after a summer rain, the legend feels even more visceral. There, the water might just be a shallow stream, but in the dead of night, it's enough. It's the recurring environment that matters, the proximity to the flow. Whether it's a grand canal, a buried river, or a humble drainage pipe, the geography is the constant. She is anchored to the Earth's own circulatory system. So, the next time you're near a body of water at night, even if it's just a decorative fountain in a modern plaza or a damp canal in a busy neighborhood, take a look around. Notice how the air feels a few degrees colder. Notice how the ambient noise of the city seems to provide a backdrop for something much older. You aren't just standing on a street corner, you're standing in her territory, and she has nowhere else to go. Now, let's peel back the layers of the image we all have in our heads, because the way she is described isn't just a coincidence, it's a carefully preserved oral ritual. You've seen the movies and the posters, but the version that lives in the spoken word, the one passed down from a grandfather to a wide-eyed child, is much more fluid and, frankly, much more terrifying. When people talk about her, they don't describe a monster with As the night deepens and the modern world finally starts to lower its volume, the living cities of Latin America reveal their true nature. The neon lights flicker, the traffic dies down, and for a few hours the ancient geography takes back the stage. Somewhere out there, right now, a river is cutting through a neighborhood that has been there for generations. Somewhere, a concrete drainage pipe is channeling water from a mountain that hasn't changed since the Aztecs. And somewhere in that darkness, someone is going to hear it. They'll stop in their tracks, their breath hitching in their chest as a long, high-pitched wail drifts across the water. They'll try to tell themselves it's an owl. They'll try to tell themselves it's the wind. They'll try to wrap themselves in all the logical explanations we've discussed today. But deep down, in that primal part of the brain that hasn't changed since we lived in caves, they will know. They will know that La Llorona is still there, crying for children who never answer. And the ultimate question, the one that will keep you awake tonight, is why the earth refuses to let her stop. Is she a warning? Is she a punishment? Or is she simply a part of the world that we weren't meant to understand? We don't have the answers. We only have the sound. And the sound is still there, waiting for the next person to walk just a little too close to the water's edge. So, as you go about your life in your bright, busy, modern city, just remember, the rivers are still flowing, and as long as they flow, she will be there, listening, waiting, and always, always crying.